Arizona's up to number 4 in the AP poll 2 weeks into the season, but should be ranked number 1 next week if this happens against UConn.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number 1 sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade. And I'm excited to talk Arizona hoops with you today. And boy, am I excited for tonight's game. Arizona and UConn, a top 4 clash, potential Final Four preview. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, so download the app today. And today on the show, I got a fun one in store for you guys. I'll go through why Arizona has the best resume in college basketball, and they easily do, and why they should be ranked number 1, assuredly, should they beat UConn, and go through the keys to the game in extra detail with emphasis on the film that I've studied on the UConn Huskies and, of course, on Arizona, and then give you guys my prediction for the game. So let's dive right in. Arizona heads to Storrs, Connecticut to face the 3rd-ranked Huskies in their home gym on campus, the first road game of the year for Arizona versus a top 3 opponent. The good news, Arizona already has 2 wins against preseason top 12 teams that were both previously ranked ahead of Arizona according to the initial AP poll, and they were on neutral floors. Arizona, through this point of the season, was projected to be 2-2 and maybe 2-3 after this game. But Arizona, in both ranked games thus far, fell behind by double digits and were undeterred as a team. And I think that unwavering poise from Jaden Bradley and this Wildcats team really means something, and is why I can see Arizona hold the 1 spot on Monday, just 5 days away, 3 weeks into the season. That would take beating UConn. I'm well aware of that. But I projected Arizona to be a top 3 team within a few weeks of the season. I said that, and I felt some skepticism about it. And then number 1 by mid-January, following what I thought would be an 18-2 start or better to the season, 7 games into conference play. But Arizona clearly already has the best resume in the country, bar none, not even close. And tonight, Arizona's got a chance to stake claim to the best win of the entire country, too. So not just already has the best resume 4 games in, but 5 games in, they'd have the best resume and would have the best win in the entire country, individually speaking. Here's Arizona's recipe for success, but here's their resume against the teams that are ahead of them in the rankings and those around them. So, refresher, obviously, you Wildcats fans know this, but Arizona's got wins against the preseason number 3 in Florida. That game was played in Vegas. That was more or less a home game, but it was definitely a neutral, more so than the road game that was considered a neutral was in Inglewood against the hated UCLA Bruins, both neutral sites, neither one of which was a true road, but it certainly wasn't a home game. And one of them was against a rival, both of them top 12 preseason, top 15 actual ranking when played. Additionally, both games were indicators of ability to win in fast tempo or in slow tempo, and neither seemed fluky at all. Neither seemed like, oh, they got really lucky because they had this anomalous stat. And that's really important because a lot of big wins happen for crazy reasons. And this didn't seem fluky at all. Purdue, at this point in the country, has the best win. Like, if you look at every team and every win that's happened by any team in the country, Purdue's got the best one. And it's singular win over Alabama in Tuscaloosa. But Bama was ranked lower in the preseason than UCLA was, and certainly lower than Florida was. Bama came in ranked 14th in the country, and Bama had a big win of their own against St. John's that elevated them into a top 10, perpetuated them into being this marquee win. And it was deserved, but I also think St. John's is far from what they'll be. So Purdue beat a team in Bama that's, 14th in the country and ends up top 10, and that's a really good win because it was actually at Alabama in Tuscaloosa. But Arizona's got 2 of them. Houston, their only good win was against Auburn, who went to overtime with Bethune-Cookman on opening night, and Houston only won by 1. So that one doesn't inspire much faith. Duke beat a brand new Texas team and just beat a team in Kansas by 12 which was an ugly game, and Kansas didn't have Darren Peterson. So I would say that doesn't inspire that much, but that is 2 solid wins, but nowhere near as good as Arizona's. UConn, who Arizona will just be playing today, beat BYU, who was missing their starting shooting guard due to a DUI, and then lost their starting center, Kebakeda, to a concussion moments into the game. And they have tons of moving pieces, lots of new transfers, a star freshman, and the game was in Boston, essentially a home game for UConn. Arizona, I've told you guys, I have them second in my poll. I tweet one out every week. Arizona's number 2 in my poll behind Purdue. And Purdue, according to my eyes, the best team in the country thus far. And I'm rewarding good wins for these people, these teams, these people, right? Like the teams that have won and the players that have played the best are getting rewarded as opposed to where their preseason ranking had them and holding them down. Arizona easily is placed in every top 5 and should be number 1 and will be number 1 should they add the best win that anyone has, including Alabama over Purdue, should Arizona beat UConn at Gampel Pavilion in Storrs, Connecticut to move to 5-0. It would be an outrage to not be ranked number 1 if that occurs and be 5-0 with wins against Florida, UCLA, and UConn. Additionally, Arizona, while playing a harder schedule than anyone, is in the top 25 in all the rankings and top 20 in the 2 most important ones in KenPom. That's 1 seed territory to be top 20 in KenPom at all in both offense and defense. So that's 1 seed territory. That's Final Four championship level contender. Typically, you got to be an elite team to be ranked within the top 20 of each. And Arizona is doing that while playing 2 really good teams. And they're 14th on offense, 12th on defense. And let me reiterate to you guys that Arizona has the best resume because they played good teams, whereas everyone else has padded their stats and had extra good efficiency by beating up on cupcakes. Arizona's got the best resume in college hoops thus far, while not necessarily being close to their ceiling. And I said this on yesterday's show. They have 1/2 of their 8 rotation players, 4 of their 8, that nowhere near where they will end up. Arizona fans didn't like when I compared this team to last year's Duke team, but that, like I said then, that's a huge compliment to this year's Arizona team because that team from Duke was an all-timer. They're 0-2 in big games early in the season, though. Arizona's already 4-0, and Cooper Flagg went from an All-American caliber player to the best player in the country, bar none, and developed the other players. Like Con Knipple became an All-American caliber player by the end of the season, which he was not close to at the beginning. And now he's picked number 4 in the draft. Like that team was immensely talented, but it took them time to become an all-time team and started 2-2 and losing big games. They lost in Champions Classic last year with Cooper Flagg making mistakes down the road. Well, mistakes were made. Koa Peat was struggling, and Arizona found a way to win in a game where he struggled. The game was played slowly at UCLA's tempo, and they also had one where he played like the best player in the country. And I think ahead of schedule, though, for Arizona is their defense. Their defense was huge in winning that game against UCLA, and they took away the rim just like Kaman Malowich did for Duke. Mo Krivas does that for Arizona. You got an All-American caliber player on the roster, and the rest of the team is going to get better. And I think Arizona's got a chance to repeat and be a 1 seed, a Final Four caliber team, much like that Duke team did. Arizona, much like that team, has the core pieces already, has the resume already, and is bound to improve drastically throughout the season, which makes them even more dangerous. That's why I like that comparison. Here's the reason that they can improve. Burries has shot dreadfully. Koa was a non-factor in a top 15, basically road game that Arizona beat UCLA in. And Karchenkov has missed everything since day 1. Arizona is well away from their ceiling, but yet still already has a real claim to be number 1 in the country and will be, absolutely, unequivocally, will be number 1 should they beat UConn tonight. We'll talk about how they beat UConn next on Locked On Wildcats. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at the bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network around. We really appreciate you. I'm Leif Thulin, your host of Locked On Wildcats. Every dayers of Locked On Wildcats have heard many of these keys from yesterday, but I'll say them again and go through their importance against UConn as to how the Wildcats can pull an upset in stores. First things first, Arizona needs to win the glass. They've done so against Florida. They've done so against UCLA. I've bemoaned that they were not as dominant as I'd hoped they'd be against NAU or Utah Tech on the glass, but in all those games, they've won the glass. Arizona won by 2 on the glass against Florida, won by 7 on the glass against UCLA. However, in those games, Arizona won the glass and therefore had more chances, but it wasn't necessarily the same style of winning the glass in those two games. Like, though I say that they won those, the winning the glass against Florida by 2 meant more than winning by 7 against UCLA, even though they clearly won the glass by more against UCLA. The other thing is they had more chances to run and score in transition than both those teams, and easy baskets and control of possession is how you win in basketball now. Those games were very different, 80-plus possessions against Florida and 69 possessions against UCLA, and that's a huge difference in college basketball. UConn is more sized like Florida than UCLA. Actually, they're fairly similar to UCLA. They're a little bigger than UCLA, but their height belies the difference. Like, Florida had specimens on the front line. UCLA had raw athletes that were slightly thin. UConn's a little more broadly built, but they aren't necessarily the athletes that Florida had up front. UConn, their front line goes 6'11", 6'8", and 6'8". And Terrace Reed, the center, 6'11", can really, really rebound. As a team, UConn averages 37 boards per game, which is not amazing considering 3 of the 4 games they've played have been against cupcakes, and they were -1 on the glass in against a BYU team that was lacking their starting center, Keba Keita, who is a tremendous rebounder. So the goal for Arizona against UConn is win the glass by 5 or more, and that seems attainable, but you got to do it. Then the other part that I think factors into this in terms of controlling the glass is controlling the paint. So my goal would be score 20 or more points. So have an advantage of 20 or more in the paint plus free throws made, meaning the points in the paint plus free throws made for Arizona has to be 20 greater than points in the paint plus free throws made for UConn. And UConn is a 3-point happy team in the sense of they don't shoot a ton, but they shoot it very well, but they shoot it more than Arizona. So Arizona has the utmost importance to control the paint, because that's the way they'll win this game, is if they are dominant at what they do very well, as opposed to getting in a 3-point shootout with the Connecticut Huskies. I made that exact same goal against UCLA of winning by 20, and Arizona was plus 23 in points in the paint plus free throws greater than UCLA. But UConn is a better offensive team than UCLA is, so this number is difficult to attain. But Arizona, like, the number I would give is 45 points in the paint, maybe 15 free throws made. Like, that seems possible. That's 60 points. You're like, wow, they scored 69 against UCLA, so maybe that's not easy. But I'll remind you, Arizona scored 81 points in the paint plus free throws made against Florida. So it's definitely attainable, but it is on the high side. So like I said, my expectation is 45 points in the paint, 15 free throws made. That's 60 points. And if that happens, UConn's ideally kept under 40 points in the paint plus free throws made, which is difficult. But like I said, Mo Krivas changed his shot charts and held UCLA to shooting sub 30% from inside the paint. He's not likely to do that every night, but Krivas changes things defensively, and it makes it a lot harder and makes UConn shoot more threes. Speaking of threes, the next key is about 3-point shooting, and it's staying competitive in threes made. UConn should win threes made as a total sum, because I expect Krivas to limit Terrace Reed on the interior. But like Arizona, UConn scores over 50% of their total points from 2. And in fact, they've been even more prolific than Arizona, shooting 65%. Yeah, let me reiterate that. 65% of 2-point field goals, making a ton of their very few attempts from 2. That number will drop assuredly against Arizona. It just can't be that high. And if it is, Arizona's got no chance. UConn will have fewer easy baskets from Terrace Reed. And because I don't think Arizona will double, I think that makes it harder for UConn to hit as many threes. And therefore, they'll need them more. So Arizona, unlike some, won't have to double. It limits some of what UConn does well. So if I had to give a numerical goal, I think Arizona needs to be within 15 points from 3, meaning that a 5 3-pointer difference. But more realistically, you got to be 3 or fewer less made threes than UConn. And I think UConn shoots 40.3% from 3. Arizona shoots 40% from deep. But UConn is the better 3-point shooting team in terms of what they can do as a unit. They've got 4 guys that I think shoot it as well or better than Arizona's top shooters, right? Like Anthony Del Orso can really shoot. If you really ask me who's the best shooter on the court, I would say Solo Ball over Del Orso. I'd say Karaban and Silas Demery and a few other guys are probably on the same levels. So 2 more keys that I think are super important are stay out of foul trouble for the crucial players and don't let them get easy buckets at the line. And especially Mo Krivas needs to stay out of foul trouble. And Koa Peat, of course, got in foul trouble last time. Those 2 are massive mismatches. Pete should be able to physically overpower Karaban. And if that's the matchup, and I expect it to be the matchup defensively, and teams will certainly go at him, take advantage of what UCLA did, go at him, create foul trouble because he's an aggressive but very competent defensive player. And Krivas changes a ton on the other end. So I fully expect Hurley will have a plan to attack Krivas and try to take him out of the game. And Krivas needs to watch some Ryan Kalkbrenner film and learn to never foul because he is so valuable, making sure other teams don't score near the hoop and then change their shot chart and don't attempt shots near the hoop. The last key is actually where I see the game decided, and I'll talk about this in the following segment. It's which supporting cast members for Arizona or UConn plays better. That means which of Anthony Del Orso, Braden Burries, Ivan Karchenkov, and Dwayne Aristode show up. How well do those guys play? And for UConn, their 4 through 8 in their rotation, maybe 5 through 8, is Jaden Ross, Eric Ryba, Malachi Smith, and Jalen Stewart. So which one of those quartets of ancillary pieces shows up and stars in their role the best? And their role is to knock down open shots and locking down a key player. Like who can get the most rebounds, win 50-50 balls, hit the most open threes of those guys. And I think that's where this game is played, because I think the stars, whom each coach will try to take away, and the scouts will be perfectly adhered to take those guys away, it is going to make the supplementary pieces be the deciders of who wins this game. Like, it's unlikely that Koa Peat can have a performance like he did against Florida, but it's also unlikely that Anthony Del Orso, Tobe Awaka, and Mo Krivas have the identical performances that they had at UCLA. Both will regress to the mean, progress to the mean, regress to the mean, whichever way you want to spin it. But that means Arizona is going to be competent in the same spot. UConn hasn't really been tested. They were front running against BYU and then ended up being tested at the end. But honestly, I wouldn't say they passed the test necessarily. And even though they won the game, they finished poorly in that game. They front run pretty well in that game against a team that I don't think is as good as Arizona, and certainly doesn't have the same understanding of what roles they possess. So I think there is a real world where Arizona pulls this upset because their team has won in ways that have been diametrically opposed. Arizona beat UCLA in a game played at a snail's pace in Inglewood with their best player non-existent. Their second best player, Jaden Bradley, was fantastic to close the game. So I don't want any slight here, but was a non-factor for the first 20 minutes. Arizona started 1 of 9, had copious amounts of turnovers, turnovers from their best player, turnovers that led to buckets on the other end, foul trouble, different things. Then against Florida, they trailed by 12, 10 minutes in, were sped up, looked overwhelmed against a team that was glowing with confidence. And then Arizona was the better team the next 30 minutes and won that game and had all the answers for all of Florida's different pushes and out-rebounded the biggest front court in the country that the very next game out-rebounded North Florida by 40. And Arizona was able to out-rebound them. Arizona's had the answers and different ways to win, and I think that resolve, resiliency, and togetherness is absolutely vital, especially when playing on the road. So I'm going to give you my final prediction and a couple things I've noticed on film that I think will play and factor into who wins this basketball game. All that and more ahead on Locked On Wildcats. College football's back, and I couldn't be more excited. Tailgates, rivalries, and energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. So I pull up the Game Time app, and just a couple taps for me, I saw amazing deals. And I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. $25. And it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you guys for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We really appreciate it, and I certainly appreciate you guys for tuning in today and supporting your beloved Wildcats against the Connecticut Huskies. I am a college basketball diehard fan, not just of Arizona basketball, but of the sport of college basketball. And in my adoration for the game of college hoops as a whole, I did deep dives all summer before the year on each team that I believed had a chance to win the national championship. My preseason rankings had UConn 3rd. For reference, I had Arizona 8th. And I have both top 3 right now. I have Arizona 2 and UConn 3. This game becomes super interesting, and I'll do my best to break it down succinctly from a perspective of having watched them play film and not just imagining them. Now I've actually studied UConn. UConn runs beautiful offensive sets. That's nothing new. And it's comprised of loads of off-ball action, stagger screens designed to get open threes, and they have many good shooters. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, their best shooter, and the one that the sets are mostly designed for, is named Solo Ball. He's a left-handed sharpshooter who is reminiscent to Jordan Hawkins from a couple of years ago's UConn first championship team of their back-to-back 2 in 2023 and 2024. Solo Ball so far, and this, you could say this is good, you could also say this is bad. He's only 8 of 26 from 3, and he's a way better shooter than that, so he's likely to get better. But I've always said volume is the best indicator of shooting ability. To have that big of a leash on a team as talented as this, that means they must really value and believe in his shooting ability. That's the guy to take away first on the scouting report. Then there's Alex Karaban, who can really shoot the ball, but he's more of a connective tissue type of piece. He's started 115 games in his 4 years at UConn, and he's won 2 titles and is the 4th best player on the team in both those title teams. But he's arguably the best 4th man in the country. And just like the title teams, he's the 4th best player again. Terrace Reed is the revelation, the growth. Offensively, he's provided an interior score to run the offense through, which they lacked a season ago as he was getting acclimated and he and Samson Johnson split time at the center spot. Lastly, they brought in Silas Demery from Georgia, who can shoot it, but really gets downhill and rebounds and puts pressure on the defense by being a big guard who can get down to the paint and have the threat to score, but also distribute. And he's a good perimeter defender as well. So let's go back to their offense, though. What do they do to get these guys the ball? Those are the 4 you need to know about. They also play a guy named Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, both of whom are, I think, NBA athletes that have varying levels of confidence shooting the ball. Like, if anyone's going to beat you that you're okay with, it's probably one of those guys. But what they're going to do is they're going to run copious amounts of pin down screens, which, if for those of you who are listening, I'm basically going to describe it as the guard, let's say Solo Ball, is at the baseline on the basketball court, and a bigger body guy, let's say Terrace Reed in this case, is going to set a screen for him above where Ball is, and Ball is going to run up towards the wing from the corner or off of the baseline towards the ball. That's a pin down screen. They run that, and then they have off-ball action on the other side. And what I think is super important about the amount they run screens, they run these stagger, they run veers. But what means the most is the necessity for defensive communication will need to be at an all-time high for Arizona. And not only because they're playing a team that has really good chemistry and passing ability and meticulousness of how they run their offense, but also it's on the road. You won't be able to hear, and teams like this are fueled and feed off of getting easy baskets. They punish confusion by their offense being so perfectly ran, and they have so many contingency plans depending on how you guard different things. So they got so many bunnies against AJ DeBonsa and BYU. Like AJ was confused trying to jump passing lanes, and all of a sudden it was a split cut, meaning that the person who set the screen on the pin down all of a sudden slipped to the hoop, unencumbered to the rack, and scored. And it confused AJ, it confused BYU's defense out of moving parts. And I'll be very, very curious to see if Arizona tries to hedge and recover on ball screens a la Houston and make Reed may be a decision maker if he's the primary screener. It didn't work well against UCLA because they had stretched guys. Reed won't shoot any. But if Alex Karaban sets the screen, I do not expect the hedge defense to come in. I think the switching defense is most likely to be employed. On defense, UConn's good, but they don't have the same depth of bigs that they've had in years past, and they also don't have a Donovan Clingan patrol in the paint as a backup center, as he was as a freshman, or a star as a sophomore. But they do have a backup center who's a freshman named Eric Ryba, who's skilled but not as sturdy. He's not necessarily a guy who's going to jump out of the gym and swat shots. My guess is UConn's going to stunt and double at Koa Peat and dare Burries, Karchenkov, and Aristode to beat them. That said, against AJ played a lot of isolation ball. There was not much help coming, but AJ is not a big. I think Koa Peat posting up against Karaban will cause problems for UConn. So my guess is they stunt and make him swing the ball out and make him decision make, as UCLA gave good teach tape of how to disrupt and make things difficult for a freshman. If I'm Arizona, one thing I'd be super intentional about is getting Terrace Reed into foul trouble, as he conducts their offense in a way as a center and is also vital on defense and anchoring their defense. A matchup that I'm sure will be highlighted on the broadcast will be Jaden Bradley, who has outplayed his counterparts, both Boogie Flan, Xavier Lee, and then Donovan Dent. Silas Demery is a very different guard. He's a big downhill driving guard who is capable of knocking down shots, but what he wants to do is touch the paint, and he's more of a score guy as opposed to a facilitator, and it's not as heliocentric around Donovan Dent as UCLA was. That'll be a very interesting matchup. And I think I'd be remiss not to mention Bradley and his clutch performances. I saw a stat that said he's only missed one shot in crunch time against UCLA and Florida with no turnovers while guarding the opposing point guard. And that is just such a boost to have this confidence that makes me believe in a close game that Arizona has more of a clear-cut knowledge of what they want to accomplish. And sometimes an egalitarian attack like one that UConn has is difficult because you don't know who to go to. Arizona's got a closer, and it's really vital. And I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll continue to say it. A team that has an aspiration to win a championship like Arizona should have and does have needs to have at least an all-conference caliber guard and a potential All-American. Jaden Bradley's performed as such. So here we get to my predictions a little bit. And I still haven't really made up my mind, but I'll do my best for you. To me, this game's going to be a low 80s type of game. This game's pace will be in between that of Florida, which was frenetically played, and the snail rock fight that the UCLA game was. So my guess is about 75 possessions in this game. And that to me means that this game will be won by the first team to score 80 points. And so to me, that means Koa Peat and Jaden Bradley need to combine to score around 40 points. And I know that's high because you can't expect 20 apiece, but you kind of need those type of performances that are not anomalous, but slightly out of the norm to win on true road games against very quality teams. Tobe Awaka, Krivas, Del Orso, that veteran trio needs to help with around 25 points. Burries, Aristode, Karchenkov, I think need to score around 20 points. That's 45 plus the 40 from Pete and Bradley, and that gets you 85 points. 85 points like that should win you the game. Burries needs to hit open threes. I think he's due to break out, but it's hard to predict a breakout in Storrs, Connecticut against a very good UConn team. Like I said, the tempo I think is going to be faster than UCLA, meaning that there's going to be less of a disruptive steal forcing defense from UConn, but a more potent offense. So Arizona needs to steal more possessions, whether it's via steals, whether it's via offensive rebounds. They need to find a way to get early and easy baskets. And the thought that I've had that is coming to my brain as I've been doing these keys, and I wish I had thought of sooner, is Arizona needs a better start because UConn can really front run. And on a road game, a true road game, the crowd gets into it and it becomes harder to come back and have the resolve that you need, that has been needed to come back from double digit deficits in both wins by Arizona that were away from home, but they also were not the home stadium for the other team. When you're at home and you're running away from a team, there's exhilarating energy. You play freely. The other team plays tight, trying to overplay to get back into the game. Arizona needs a better start. And my head has told me, getting to the prediction, that since the preseason, that UConn's one of the best 4 teams in the country and deserves to be favored in a game. And I said in my preview of the season that I think UConn's the only game that I think Arizona loses because it's in stores. And I just think that the matchup's hard because Arizona is a good defensive team, not a great one. And offensively, they're good, but they're finding their identity, and UConn has their identity already. And this game has me second guessing that thought because Arizona has solved every different riddle with such impressive resolve, such impressive togetherness, different players stepping up. They're not reliant on one player. So with all that said, my gut had told me and my brain had told me that UConn would win, that UConn would find a way and win a close game, build a little bit of a lead and front run and hold off Arizona around like 83-79. But for some reason, I'm doubting UConn. Terrace Reed's playing at 80%. Give me 82-80, Arizona Wildcats, Koa Peat leading the way with 22. I may regret changing my pick, but you heard it here first. Please let me know your guys' picks. If you agree with the logic, the odds favor UConn by 5.5, and I think that's reasonable. My 83-79, which I initially wrote when writing this notes of keys to the game and projections, that is kind of what I came up with. But I flipped it. I want the Wildcats. I think they've got a real chance. They need to get into this game sooner. Can't wait to cover it. Join for postcast tomorrow night following the game, and hopefully celebrating an Arizona victory, which would propel them to number 1 in the rankings, and that would be awesome. So please tune into that and listen to this. Enjoy. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll breaks down the most exciting conference and college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and every game in between. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.